Hey, we're back with another YouTube Live. This time we're covering some really timely, important news going on in the Terra ecosystem. The Nexus Protocol IDO just happened yesterday. It went live on Pylon, the gateway. There was a Pylon swap. Nexus was a penny each. And, I think people are very excited about this protocol, but a lot of people actually don't understand the full potential of the protocol yet. That's why I have a special guest on. Ernestus, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How about you?
Good, man. Ernestus is my buddy. We chat pretty frequently, and he's the person that I think did one of the deepest dives into Nexus and the white paper and the light paper and the potential of the whole thing. A lot of people assumed that Nexus was a yield optimizer for Anchor. Make sure you don't get liquidated. Make sure you can borrow while getting paid without sleepless nights, that kind of thing. So people kind of pigeonholed it into this smaller thing. But when I started listening to Ernestus and kind of his thoughts on like the more underground, or not underground, but like less explained ways that people are actually going to get some value out of Nexus, I thought, hey, let's talk about it, because the token generation event is happening very soon. When is that happening?
October 11th.
October 11th. It is now the 5th. So there's about 6 days left. And let's see if we can turn some of you into Nexus maxis. What made you interested in Nexus in the first place?
Just kind of following everything that's happening on Terra. And these guys were like one of the first to list after Columbus 5. So wanted to see what's happening with it. And I'm especially interested in the projects that are doing things directly with Luna, because a lot of projects are launching, like they launch their own token, then they do things, and they focus on UST, and that's all good. But we don't have many good yield opportunities on Luna itself. Like we have now, Nexus will be a big one. We have Prism that's launching way later, I think next month, and then we have Levana, and like that's about it for the protocols that are actually doing things with Luna itself. It's like this subset of new projects to do things with Luna is very exciting for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Currently, you could turn your Luna into B Luna, deposit it on Anchor, and then get paid to borrow. Or what was revealed maybe 6-7 months ago is you could go to TerraSwap, go to provide, and you could provide parts B Luna and Luna, and you'd actually have a decent APY from that activity. Sometimes if you looked at the pool, it would range from 50% to 17%, depending on the volatility of Luna at the time. The Nexus is different, but before we do a deep dive, do you want to give just like an intro on like someone's never heard of Nexus before, and what is it?
Yeah, actually, I want to talk about it first, because like how all of this started and how like I got some engagement by accident on Twitter is like with the tweets about like how the main product is actually the Luna LPs. So that kind of changed the narrative a bit from the original like Nexus idea and like what people were talking about. But the original narrative about just being like a yield optimizer isn't bad either. So I think we can like kind of build up from there, like what Nexus does at its core without the end LP goal. Like, because I think that's exciting too, if that makes sense.
So let's start with the 101, like non-degen, non-ape. Like, what is the easiest way to understand what Nexus is all about? Starting point.
Yeah. So everyone who already uses Anchor to borrow against their Luna so that they can farm Anchor, and then they put that UST into Anchor again to get 20% on that UST. Like there's a ton of people doing that. I think before we had a lot of people like leveraging with borrowing, but after the May crash, a lot of people kind of started becoming a lot more safe, and instead they are just what they borrowed, they put it back into Anchor itself so that they are liquid and they can exit anytime, no matter the price. So people are doing that.
Let's double click there. So if you look at my screen, and I'm assuming you guys can see my screen, let me know if you can't, but we have Anchor Protocol here. You go into the app, you pair your Terra Station wallet, and there's an earn tab and there's a borrow tab. If you want to borrow UST, you can supply collateral into the Anchor Protocol system. There's currently two forms of collateral available. It's bonded Ethereum and bonded Luna. The idea here is you can borrow money as long as you provide collateral, and you need to keep a safe loan to value ratio. Otherwise, that collateral will be liquidated in order to repay your loan. And this is a very popular protocol because, I mean, total value locked is close to 5 billion now. There's over $1 billion UST currently being borrowed. And in terms of how much collateral is on the system, we have $3 billion worth of collateral on the system. So the idea is have enough collateral, keep your loan to value below 60%. And the reason why this has been such a home run is because currently they're bootstrapping the demand of borrowing UST by paying you to borrow. So obviously when you borrow money, you have to pay an interest rate. The current interest rate for borrowing money is 26%. Okay. However, the way TFL engineered this is they're also paying you to borrow, and they're paying you in Anchor tokens. So you're getting paid 36.5% APR to borrow. You're getting charged 26.03% APR to borrow. So you're net positive, you're getting paid 10% to borrow money. So that's why there's a lot of demand for borrowing money, because you're getting paid to borrow. And that was working really well. And then something happened in May. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the next step is once you borrow, like what do you do with that? Right? Like you have a bunch of money, and then you usually are okay paying interest to borrow money because you can make more money with what you borrow. So here we have that the borrowing is free. You're paid to borrow, and then you have money that now you can do something with. So in May, a bunch of people were very bullish on Luna, and a lot of people were borrowing money to buy more Luna, and then collateralizing that Luna again to borrow even more, and essentially getting leverage on Luna. And then in May, suddenly Luna is crashing, and then you can't really take out your loan. You can't return that money because you put that money into your collateral that's now crashing. Like you don't have enough money to return. So then you get liquidated, and then your liquidations are sold at 30% discount. Now it was improved, but back then it was 30% discount. So a lot of people got burned through that. So what they do now is they go into Earn tab after borrowing money here. They go into Earn tab of Anchor Protocol and deposit their dollars there.
So they go to the earn tab, which you see borrow, and then there's earn. So they basically borrow the money. Let's say they deposit $20,000, they borrow $10,000, then they go ahead and they deposit it into earn.
Yeah, like now after like so many people got burned from like leverage and like the risks with that, like a lot more people are doing just this. You borrow, you get on what you borrowed, you get like 10% now, and then what you borrowed, you put into this, and then you get 20% on this, and this is completely liquid. If Luna is crashing, your dollars that you borrow are not crashing together with Luna, so you can exit this and pay back your loan and have zero losses and just farm money this way. So like that's incredibly common now. It would be funny to actually like analyze chain data, like how many people are actually doing this. But just like it's a very common strategy now, like talked about by everyone.
Yeah, I do it. That was my main thing, especially throughout the bear market. Just borrow, deposit it into earn. You get paid to borrow. You make money on your borrowed money. I mean, the net. I'm not sure what the net APY APR of the whole thing was, but it was a really nice way to accumulate Luna during this mini bear market, May through July.
Yeah, during the bear market, it should have been pretty good because the uh, on the borrowing side, the API was like crazy, like 120% or something.
So where does Nexus fit into all this?
So Nexus does all of this for you automatically. Like Nexus employs this strategy completely automatically so that you don't need to follow Luna price and manage it yourself. So that if Luna pumps up, you don't need to manually increase how much you borrow to farm more. If Luna is falling down, you don't need to manually pay the uh, pay what you borrow to not get liquidated. Like Nexus does all of this for you, and they do it like there's already bots to do that. You can run your own bot that does it, but Nexus is trying to like really like make it safe. Like they talk about it more in their white paper. Like they are considering a lot of things. They're considering what happens if Anchor is uh, lagging, what happens if entire chain is lagging, what happens with how do we get Oracle price feeds earlier than Anchor itself does so that we have more time to react versus others. Like their bot is way more advanced, and it's completely trivial for anyone to start doing that.
Yeah,
That's
let me
the core.
double click on that. I do have a bot, and it helps me sleep easier. The way this bot works, and I'll just give a shout to the person who created the bot in case anyone's curious. This is the bot that I've been using by Foolproof. It's called the Anchor Borrow bot. And the idea was I have like a virtual private server. I download this thing, follow the instructions, get it running. You have to feed it your seed phrase, and you can give it commands. You can tell it to maintain a safe LTV range between like 45 and 50, for example. And if the LTV goes above 50, then the bot is monitoring like every few seconds. And once it triggers, it takes money that you've deposited in Anchor Earn, it cashes it out, it then puts it to repay the borrow, and it brings your LTV down. So if there's like a highly volatile liquidity event, the bot kind of triggers. And then if the price is skyrocketing, or like Luna, it's going past $50 or whatever, and the LTV gets quote unquote too safe, then it can actually borrow on your behalf and automatically deposit it into Anchor, and it's all good, which is nice. But I've still, like, the bot does break sometimes. The private server does go down sometimes. It does randomly stop working sometimes. And I don't fully trust it for sure. So I'm always testing to see if it's still running, if it's still going. So even though it's nice, it's not like this automatic thing that works every time. There's still room for improvement, but it does kind of get the job done. And Nexus takes that whole thing to the next level. How would you say Nexus builds upon that kind of concept?
Like from technical perspective, how they protect you from liquidations.
Like a simple kind of, like, I know they go into like three different ways of protect against liquidations. I don't think we need to get into all those details, but
Yeah, they essentially do what you just said. Like the end result is same. It's just that you yourself, you don't need to think about like, will the virtual machine break while I'm sleeping? Like, we had Facebook being down in the entire world for half a day. Like these things break. So you kind of outsource taking care of that to someone else who like builds infrastructure to manage big amount of money for this. Um, and then they really go into like technical details of how to ensure that the funds are safe, and they have different levels of risk. They will start in the very beginning, I think, with maximum 45% loan to value ratio. And then they will slowly increase that as they are more confident with how secure their infrastructure is with handling with keeping your funds safe. So it's just kind of outsourced thing that it really should make it easier for everyone, and it's completely trivial for anyone to do it. No one needs to know what a virtual machine is.
Yep. So we can consider that version 1 of Nexus. It's what they're launching with. It's what people are going to mainly use it for. And they're also launching a governance token, right? The side token. And people have experience with Anchor. They've seen other various governance tokens, and it's almost kind of a meme. It's like having a token for voting rights. It turned into kind of like a farm and dump token. And people, I think this is where people aren't really sure where the side token kind of fits into all this, where the true value of having the side token is, and like why people should accumulate this token. I kind of want to get into that as the next thing. And our friend Deepak Kumar is also very interested about Psi. So do you want to just kind of come in with an introduction on the token?
Yeah, sure. So I agree that like governance tokens is a meme. How many times did you use your ANC tokens to vote on something? And there was like 3 votes. Like what people will not agree to vote in Ethereum. People will not agree to upgrade to Columbus 5. Like it's a joke governance that maybe someday will be important, but now it literally doesn't matter. So I completely understand that like view on these tokens and being careful of that. Now with this, so they will pay you the yield in their own token, and you can say that it's bad because maybe you don't trust the token, but then there's no one telling you cannot sell it. Like there's literally no reason to run your own bot versus just doing this. If you don't like their token, just use their infrastructure and sell the token. That's completely fine. But there will be people who will not sell the token, and people who will not sell the token will leave the positive buy pressure on the token because they pay all the yield in their own token. Unlike like something like Anchor that pays everyone 20% on like $2 billion, but they pay that in dollars. They're not paying in their own token. So they will be paying all the yield in their own token. Some people will be leaving and not will be not selling that yield immediately. So that buy pressure will be kept up to some extent.
So if someone used Anchor, they'd be getting some rewards in Ink token and some rewards in UST if they were doing the borrow to earn thing. In this case, Nexus is it's getting those USTs, it's getting those Ink tokens, and what's it doing with them to give you side tokens?
So the side tokens come from that like strategy in Anchor of borrowing. So what you do is how you start an Anchor to borrow. You take your Luna, you make it into B Luna, and then use that as collateral to start everything. Here, what you do is you take your Luna, you make it into B Luna, and then instead of putting B Luna into Anchor, you put B Luna into Nexus, and then Nexus in return gives you N Luna. And now this N Luna does all of that activity of borrowing money, putting it into Anchor, selling their rewards, all of that, they're doing it for you automatically while you're holding that N Luna. And all the yield from this activity is paid to you back in PSI token. So this is not inflationary. Like this part is completely buybacks of like current marketplace, whatever the price is, the tokens are bought back and paid to you as yield in PSI token. So that immediately is like, I think at the moment this is like highest like buyback like ratio like in an entire Terra ecosystem, because Anchor is like 10% of collateral that goes to governance takers, and Mirror is 20% of a 20% of deposited dollars. So that's like 2% of all the UST that is deposited. This will be like around 13% as a starting point. 13% from all everything deposited that is buybacks. So it's immediately the biggest buybacks we have in the entire TFL system.
So you're saying I'm looking at the little graphic here on the light paper. So I'm the user. I have B Luna. I feed it into the vault, and Nexus gives me back N Luna. So now I have N Luna in my wallet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I have this N Luna, and I have a couple options with that N Luna. What are the all the things I can do with my N Luna?
So and Luna just on its own, just holding it, like just making it into an Luna, it's already in the vault and it's creating yield and it's creating PSI buybacks. That's it. And you'll be able to claim PSI tokens just from holding this asset. Similar to how B Luna works. If you don't put B Luna into, if you don't collateralize it, you get UST tokens you can earn. Like because the B Luna has its own inherent yield. It's just like pretty small. It's like 3 point something percent.
Mm-hmm.
So this is similar. You'll be holding N Luna, but you'll be getting like 12% yield on this just from holding in PSI tokens. But now because you're not just staking these tokens, they're not locked somewhere. This is a liquid token that is generating yield in your wallet. That means this liquid yield generating token can be used in other protocols. Other protocols might take it to build on it. Other protocols might, or like their own protocol might take a yield bearing token in other smart contracts and do things with that.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that, not exactly the same, but we have that with AUST. AUST, instead of kind of generating yield as a separate thing to claim, AUST increases its own value. Like just by holding it, the value of it increases. But that allows you to create the farms in Mirror where you like make delta neutral, but use AUST, I God, I can't pronounce it anymore. AUST, where you can like use it somewhere else while generating yield itself. So this property of having a yield bearing asset that is tradable is incredibly powerful, and we don't have many things like that. Like but entire DeFi is built on that. LP tokens is that. And when you put LP tokens and someone else makes a compounder, so you give your LP tokens to someone else, and then they compound it and do other things with it. Like that's an incredibly powerful concept. Like having yield on a liquid asset is
Yield
super powerful.
bearing building block asset. Yep. One thing I don't necessarily understand is I get everything you just said with the user to be Luna, and then you have N Luna in your wallet, and it's sitting in your wallet and it's accumulating yield. How so when you stick it into the B Luna vault, it's like it's automatically doing the whole Anchor Nexus borrow max LTV to Anchor earn thing. Like, do you have an option to activate that, or the second you add it to the B Luna vault, it does that?
I believe like it just does that.
That's just
I
what it's doing. Yeah,
yeah,
that
like
makes
you'll
sense.
yeah.
Okay, and then you're sitting there, so it's doing this whole thing that we talked about automatically, which is that's pretty cool. Honestly, that's by itself that's pretty cool. But you're saying now you're sitting here with N Luna, and you could just sit there and accumulate the rewards, and you get paid in side token. But is the next level of what you can do? Is that where it gets really, really interesting? Is that the part where people aren't really talking about yet?
Yeah. So what I originally said, that like the main product of Nexus will be not the like the interesting part, not the main product. The interesting part will be not the 13% on your N Luna. it will be liquidity pools with your N Luna. Like, because liquidity pools will have incentives. How we, like, if you look at let's say Apollo and how much LTV they have on Mirror and Anchor, like it's insane. Like there's not Mirror, oh, sorry, Mine. Like there's like $77 million LTV in Mine LP, because Mine LP pays 160% API. So it doesn't matter if you like Mine or not. Like if you don't think it's gonna dump, it's just literally the highest yield you can get now, and people will ape. Uh, and we don't have any incentives to LP Luna or Ethereum. Like that doesn't exist. No one is printing like inflationary tokens to incentivize you to hold Luna, and everyone wants to hold Luna. So if you wanna get high yield on Luna, there's actually not many options at the moment. There is like Terra swap, like L Luna, B Luna LPs, but those are not incentivized and completely depend on trading activity.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And maybe you can, like, I think there's some pools on like Solana or somewhere, or
yeah,
and Harmony One that has high APY incentivized. But you're saying it's on the actual host chain. We haven't seen it. And is Nexus incentivized? The LPs here?
yes, yes. Nexus has a significant portion. Like actually, we can look it up. Like I think in their PDF, like how much, what's the percentage for the an asset LP incentives. Maybe it should be in the, I think in the bottom, like there's tokenomics. Yeah, here.
Tokenomics. This one? Right here.
Yeah, so 25% of entire supply. So I think this is literally the biggest part. Yeah, that's why I'm saying like this LP will be the main attractor to this entire ecosystem, not the 12%. This will be the main attractor because and they see that themselves. They're not really talking much about it now, but that's why this is the biggest part of their entire like token supply going towards this.
Now, the thing I thought was interesting is, if you guys haven't heard about the concept of an incentivized LP, it's basically, what a liquidity pool is. It's two pairs. You put it into a pool in equal amounts, and you take on some risk in terms of impermanent loss and volatile price action, but you get paid for that risk by fee shares. So you earn fees by providing liquidity. And oftentimes these pools are incentivized. And what that means is the project has set aside a certain amount of tokens that, as people deposit into the pool, they pay you extra tokens for doing that. So regardless of how often the pool is used, what the fees are, you're getting paid a certain APY, APR, whatever it is, to just have your money, have your tokens sitting in there. And that's become pretty popular in general. But what Ernestus has picked up on, and he was sharing this in the Nexus telegrams, which is how I started to kind of try to get my head around it, is what we talked about earlier, is that when these assets are sitting in your wallet, they're yield bearing assets. So if you have what's it called? Is it N Luna? And
Yes.
yeah, so
They're called N assets because basically all B assets will be able to become N assets. So at the moment, N Luna and N Ethereum.
So you start with your B Luna, you start with your B ETH, you put it into the Nexus vault. It spits. I mean, it's just launching with Luna, I think, right? As the
No, it's
version.
launching with N ETH with day one.
Both of them. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So you're gonna have N Luna and N ETH sitting in your wallet, and these are yield bearing assets. And if you've ever gone to Terra Swap, I'll show you guys this. I think it's important to really get to the aha moment. If you ever used Terra Swap and you went into the web app and you looked at the provide tab, you could provide liquidity for Luna and B Luna so that when people are trying to swap between the two assets, you get paid a fee. Now, the thing is, if you just kept your B Luna inside your wallet and you went to Anchor, then you would see certain rewards accumulating for your B Luna, like you see here, because as Ernesto said, it's a yield bearing asset. So that yield is going somewhere. And if it's in the case of B Luna, it's going into this little thing here and you can claim it. However, if you decided you wanted to provide liquidity for Luna, B Luna, and you put it into TerraSwap, the yield that you get from that B Luna, what do you still get that yield if you're providing liquidity for it?
I think at the moment, like it's either being burned or like no one is claiming, because TerraSwap definitely didn't build any smart contracts to like redirect yield. It's like a very basic thing. But yeah, no one is getting that at the moment. Maybe it's like accumulating somewhere.
So is that the same thing with Nexus, or does something different happen there?
Yeah, that's where like that's I think that's the only like confusing part about Nexus, because like the LPs and like incentives, like that alone is exciting. But like the really smart thing these guys did is that this N asset that now is getting like around 12% yield, uh, that yield is going back into the LP itself. So let's go through like an example of if you have a liquidity pool of N Luna and PSI, that means on both sides there's equal amount of both, like equal amount of dollar value in both. And then because half of this pool, the N Luna part, is earning yield that is paid in PSI, and PSI is the right side of this pool. Now this yield is from N Luna is just kind of increasing the PSI side of the pool. And when this happens, you have an imbalanced pool, because usually when you trade pool, like if you make a trade, no matter what kind of trade it is, the value of pool in both sides must be equal. But when you have this imbalanced pool where the N Luna is creating more PSI, that creates essentially an ARB opportunity. And in Terra, ARB opportunities is everything. Like Terra wouldn't exist without ARB opportunities. That's how Luna works. That's how UST works. That's like the whole point of this entire thing. So when you have this imbalanced pool, this creates an ARB opportunity where someone is incentivized to create a new N asset to buy this PSI token in this pool, because in this pool there's more PSI. On PSI side, there's more tokens than there should be, because it's kind of a growing side. There's more tokens than there should be. So they can create an N asset and then get PSI tokens, sell it off, and keep the difference for themselves. So they made money. It's like guaranteed money without basically any risk.
Mm-hmm. And if for people listening out there, if this is your first exposure to liquidity pools and how liquidity pools remain balanced, like a lot of this is going to sound confusing. So I may even suggest like there's a lot of content about how liquidity pools work and how they remain balanced and what kind of mechanisms they have in place to incentivize arbitrators, arbs, to come in and balance the pool when it becomes unbalanced. And it's kind of like game theory, the same way Luna is set up, right? Like the way the UST peg is maintained is through ARB opportunities using Luna. Those opportunities there, that's basically how a lot of this stuff works in terms of liquidity pools. So what Ernestus is saying is usually an ARB opportunity comes because one asset of the liquidity pool has higher or less demand than the other asset. So it's like, let's say, you have a pool of UST and Luna, and there's some crazy news announcement about Luna, like native UST is going to, or native Luna is going to be launched on Coinbase. So people are going to be in a frenzy to buy Luna. What happens is they go to this, whatever liquidity provider, whatever DEX, and they deposit UST, they buy up all the Luna. So then this pool is going to have like, it's just going to have more UST and less of Luna because someone took Luna out of the pool and added UST into the pool. So ARBs, they see this and it's an opportunity for them to make money by balancing it out, doing their arbitrage thing. What Ernestus is saying here is that we don't need any like demand or supply side changes for this pool to become unbalanced. By the nature of having a liquid token as one pair of the pool, there's always going to be an imbalance. And that imbalance benefits the Psi token because Psi token is not the yield bearing asset. The ETH or the B Luna, that's the yield bearing asset. So the only way to balance those pools is to purchase more Psi token. Is that right?
Actually, the only way to balance those pools is to purchase the yield-bearing asset, because the yield-bearing asset creates PSI, like not creates PSI, but like it earns PSI. So for one N Luna, you can get more PSI because the PSI side is now higher than the fair market price, and that's the ARP opportunity. But it's beneficial for Nexus to just kind of increase more N assets because all that N assets do is buy more PSI tokens. So it increases the buy pressure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the imbalance actually drives up the demand for the N asset. And as the demand for the N asset increases, on the back end, it's just driving the buy, like the buybacks of the Psi asset and
Yes.
the general T. Is that how it works?
Yes. So, and I see like people sometimes like when they hear this, they think, okay, so essentially it will be sell pressure on PSI token. Like it sounds logical. Like so we will be selling. There will be ARPS opportunities to sell PSI token to buy more N assets, and okay, N assets are beneficial long term, but with short term, we just sold a bunch of PSI, and like that's a fair point. But the way it's a bit hard to explain, but like the way it actually ends up being is that like net positive of PSI buybacks is still like positive because so you're in the pool, the left side, the N Luna side, bought back X amount of PSI tokens. Then someone else to make that, and then that X amount now is added to the PSI side. Now, for someone else to balance this pool, they don't. There's no sell of the entire X. There's sell of half of X. So half of X keeps being in the pool. So the PSI side increases by half of that increase, and now the left side and Luna side increases by half too. So it balances out 50% because the entire pool needs to balance. It grows 100% on PSI side, and then to balance it out, from 100% it reduces to 50% on PSI side and increases 50% on N Luna side. So the net result is still positive buy pressure on PSI token. It's just like kind of 50%, and then like half of entire buy pressure from N tokens ends up being actual buy pressure because another half was sold off to balance N Luna part. But that's beneficial because now that N Luna part is actually compounding on itself because now it will buy even more PSI tokens, which will keep increasing the total PSI buybacks. I don't know if any of this makes sense when like I'm talking about it. It's kind of hard to like place it in your head.
Yeah, I mean we're putting it out there. Some giga brains will hear it and it'll make sense. For some smaller brains like me, it'll make more sense when I see it in action, right? But in general, you're saying there will be sell pressure, there will be buy pressure. The buy pressure on the token is going to be higher than the sell pressure, which is, it's a pretty bold thing to say, because what we've seen so far is we've seen anchor and we've seen mirror, and anchor and mirror have some of the probably ugliest charts in Luna, in crypto in general, because there is a lot of sell pressure because they're using incentivized liquidity. They're using incentivized rewards on anchor and incentivized liquidity rewards on mirror, and it's just creating a lot of dump pressure. So you're saying we're actually getting some kind of buy pressure to balance out that sell pressure. We still have some incentivized liquidity pools here, but for the first time, we have something that's actually balancing it out as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I shared this. I shared it with some people. I think this is. I really don't know how to make this like clearer. I think this is like essentially 3 points in time, and I think this kind of captures very clearly how it ends up being net positive by pressure. Can you maybe try going through it so like I see if you kind of like think some parts are confusing?
Okay. So looking at a Google Sheet here, and I'll put this in the description if Ernest is cool with that your starting LP is worth balanced out 100 N Luna and 1,000 Psi tokens. And this is just kind of an estimate on whatever the price is at the time. For N Luna, if it was just liquid, you'd be making 12% yield paid in Psi. But because you put it into this liquidity pool, that 12% is now contributing to I guess an imbalance within this pool. This imbalance, given enough time, after 1 year, it would lead to 100 N Luna and 1120 Psi tokens. So there's the imbalance. If your N Luna stays the same, if the price stays the same, the Psi token imbalance is this number because of the liquid yield bearing. Is that right?
Yeah, the 100 N Luna will generate 12% yield. That yield is paid in PSI, so that yield will go on the PSI side. So and this yield is by pressure. So we are now like positive by pressure.
And then we trigger an imbalance here, and this is an ARB opportunity, and we have lots of whale ARBs who have bots that look for ARB opportunities, and someone ARBs this to earn some UST and balances the pool. So you end up with 160 N Luna, 1060 Psi Luna. So what did the ARB do exactly? It came into the pool, it bought up, what did it do?
Yeah, so they essentially brought new N Luna.
Okay, so they bought up N Luna or they had it, or they brought it up, and they brought it to this pool. So they deposited 6 N Luna to balance it out, and they took out the Psi, right?
Yeah. So this is essentially like what it needs, that previous pool, what it needs to become balanced again. Mm-hmm. Like money doesn't like really leave it; it just kind of balance itself out.
Okay, so you consider this sell pressure on the Psi token, right?
Yes.
This is sell pressure. Generated sell pressure 60 Psi, but the net positive buy pressure was 60 Psi. Because there's 6 additional N Luna in the pool, and this N Luna is yield bearing, and over time it generates 60 Psi. Is that what the math is there?
No, so the original, like in the previous one, there was generated 120 Psi, and that 120 Psi created that ARB opportunity, and during this ARB opportunity, 60 Psi was sold. So the net buy pressure, like 120 minus 60, is 60.
Gotcha. Following along so far. And now you're saying the sell pressure wasn't just cashing in, it bought and Luna, which is now positively affecting Psi because you're getting more Psi yield from this earlier step, which will buy even more in Luna.
Yeah, now it will create bigger ARB opportunities, and from these bigger ARB opportunities, you'll have even more net positive buy pressure. Like now, instead of like 60 Psi buy pressure, it will be like 62. Like it's kind of growing on its own, truly, fully through ARB opportunities without any, like you don't need any trading activity, you don't need anything. Simply that existing and getting yield makes this happen.
Okay, cool. The screen is blurry and the volume is too soft to be heard. Is my audio bad? Guys, just leave a comment if my audio is no good. But and this is all made possible because of Anchor's high inflation rate. Is that correct?
To some extent, because even if Anchor inflation rate was zero, like let's say it doesn't cost anything to borrow, you would still be getting 20% yield on borrowed money by depositing air.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that covers a lot of the potential. Is there like a next level that we haven't discussed yet, or is that the thing?
I'm just excited about like the things that the team will keep doing with like better vaults, because increasing this base 12% will kind of have an effect everywhere else. Uh, like they will make mirror pools. They will work with Levana Prism protocol, just create vaults that have better yield, and that better yield will have like a compounding effect through all of this. So that's the exciting part. And short term, regarding the price of the token itself, the exciting part is those LPs. Like if there is 100 million of LTV that people wanna like stake LP to get yield on their Ethereum and Luna, on while in the first few months, while there's very little tokens, while the inflation is still low because there's not many tokens out yet, like that's just huge. That will have insane impact on the price.
So you could have these LPs, and then like let's say Apollo creates a vault for it, an auto compounder, or Spec does it, and it's
Yeah,
just adding layers and building blocks. And you're saying
yeah.
these end assets are one of the ultimate building blocks because it's taking B Luna and it's multiplying the potential yield by all this automatic uh, borrowing and anchor earning and all this stuff. And then you can take that asset, further compound it, and you can. It's pretty interesting, yeah. And then if you pair it with Psi and you're holding Psi, Psi can become pretty accumulate a lot of value as well. I mean, do you think that what is your outlook on the Psi token? Do you think it's going to perform well? Do you see it? How do you see it
I
being treated by the market?
I think it will not. It will be kind of boring to people in the beginning on the launch, because they will not release the LPs in the very beginning. They said they will release that once the price of the token stabilizes. So it won't be too exciting in beginning. It will get exciting when like people see I can get 100% API on my Ethereum. So if I have, I don't know, let's say $10,000 worth of Ethereum and I want to farm with it, I need to buy $10,000 worth of PSI token. And
Yes.
that's exciting in the next 2 months, like demand for all of this. And then later on, Apollo suddenly lists them. And suddenly, like now, Apollo has 70 million LTV of mine tokens. And there's way more money of Luna and Ethereum than mine tokens. The demand for high API farms will be way higher for Luna and Ethereum.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see a lot of potential there. It makes a lot of sense. I know we've chatted about this on Telegram a lot, but hearing it on video and kind of walking me through it here, it's really helped me understand it. Hopefully, the viewers get that same kind of feeling. We do have some questions here. I think we can start wrapping up here in the next few minutes. Let's look at some of the questions and see what we can answer. Tokenomics asks, I believe STT airdropped their tokens to Luna holders. Do you think Nexus is doing the same? I don't think Nexus has talked about Luna, have they?
No, they're not even doing airdrops to Luna. That's another really like one of the things I really like about these guys. Like everything they do just sounds smart to me. The only airdrop they do is for Anchor, so for ANC holders. And if you were following this, uh, the ANC price is very important for them because they basically just keep selling ANC for yield. So if they're able to pump ANC price themselves, they're just basically securing their own yield. And they will be like airdropping 11% of their entire supply to ANC stakers.
So their vault works because of Anchor's incentivized borrow plus Anchor earn, and automatically they're going to take whatever they get from Anchor and they're going to liquidate it, turn it into side tokens. In order to balance this, what they decided to do is provide airdrops for Anchor stakers and only Anchor stakers. So this is going to be something that's weekly, and it goes on for several years, at least 4 years, I believe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, next question. Will they do Luna and Luna?
I don't think so. Like they will have PSI pools only. That will be incentivized. But if anyone can create any pool. Terra Swap is open protocol. Anyone can create any pool. The issue is how you will get liquidity. That's why these liquidity incentives exist.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Will Nexus be taking a snapshot for Inc. governance holders weekly? Did they say weekly, or did they say like they would take it consistently, like every block or something?
I think something like hourly, yeah. And then
Yeah.
you get based on the average you had every week.
So Patrick said likely, yeah, looking at about an hour each. Let's see, what else do we have here? Audio is good. Awesome. Okay. And final question. I'm seeing other chains on the roadmap. Is the plan to use chain native versions of Nexus on those chains or bridge over to Terra? What do you think?
Uh, I'm not sure if I understand correct. Is the plan to use chain native versions of Nexus? So in the bridge, like so they will have the Ethereum Nexus like side, and in the Ethereum native side will not the users will not see PSI token at all if that's what you're talking by like tokens. Like PSI won't exist on Ethereum. The Ethereum side will only see like the native Ethereum, but in the background they will do all of this for them in the Terra. They will bridge it. Similar what Orion does with UST dollars in Ethereum too. It's just that they will do that automatically for people on Ethereum to attract, and they will be offering like 10% on your Ethereum, which is like biggest yield on Ethereum you can get, like single side, no LPs. Yeah,
Well, so there's going to be ETH Nexus. I don't think it comes out until next year sometime, but the
I think
person's,
this year actually. Like
is it?
I think this the first thing they will do after launch, like the first next thing is ETH Nexus. I might be wrong, but I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to the truffle pig, if you guys know who that is, and this is what he was most excited about. Actually, is just having Ethereum, depositing it into something like an ETH Nexus, and get paid back in Ethereum. And that's the idea with the ETH Nexus, right? As you put in Ethereum, you get out Ethereum.
Yeah, exactly. And the way it will benefit PSI token is that if you do this natively through Ethereum, you will get lower yield, like significantly lower than doing it natively. So that means, like, let's say 4% or 3% of the yield will be kept as PSI tokens inside of Terra ecosystem.
That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Okay. I mean, did we cover everything that we wanted to cover? I feel like we went through a lot.
Yeah, I talked a lot.
Talked a lot. You guys should definitely give Ernestus a follow. Ernestus Dobb, Twitter is his handle. I think he will become the premier Nexus kind of information provider here in the near future. Just starting to focus more on his Twitter. So if you enjoyed the content and you appreciated some of the stuff he had to say, feel free to hit him up on Twitter. And we'll finish with one more potential question here. Is the overall APR that much higher than just staking Luna? I guess he's talking about the N Luna vaults. What would you say to that?
I think in the after Columbus 5, it should be relatively similar. Big difference is that you are completely liquid. You can exit anytime without 21-day wait where you're just losing yield. And another big thing is that Nexus will be like improving the vaults and creating new vaults with higher yield. So over time, that number should go up too.
Awesome. There you have it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ernestus.
Yep. Thank you too.